This isn't clear enough. I have a little bit of laryngitis this morning, so I hope you'll bear with me. The topic of security procedures in shul is very, very prominent of late. There are many different approaches towards guaranteeing security in shuls. Unfortunately, it's become a reality today where many shuls have armed guards patrolling the premises. Other shuls have volunteers with walkie-talkies to make sure that everybody who comes to shul is a member and is there for the right reason, because unfortunately we've seen some terrible tragedies. What I want to explore this morning briefly, because we can't go into too much detail, is the halachic background to the whole notion of protection of the Jewish communal structure, whether it's for a town, whether it's for a synagogue, how it was looked at historically and halachically, and what are some of the issues today. To what extent is it permissible for shul members, for example, to walk around with walkie-talkies on Shabbos for security? What's the nature of the threat? Is it the same as, for example, you can mechal Shabbos to save a person's life, or someone is ill? This falls into the same category. It's a potential hazard that doesn't really, it's a davar shelo b'olam. It doesn't really exist yet, unless you want to argue that we're constantly in a situation of threat. So let me look at some of the Talmudic precedents for the notion of protecting the community and how one went about it. The first discussion in the halacha has to do with whether you use volunteers or whether you hire people to do it, professionals, so to speak. And you have to understand that in ancient times, up to the Middle Ages, most Jewish communities in the city, at least, were surrounded by a wall. So if the wall was closed at night, that was pretty much of a security barrier right then and there. But people who lived outside the wall, people who lived in cities that did not have a wall surrounding it, there were questions about volunteers versus hired guards. And question number two is, how do you pay for it? Who pays for it? Is it an equal amount for every member of the community? Or is it a structured system where those who have more to lose would pay more? If a person is a garbage collector and another person owns a factory, the factory owner obviously should kick in more because he has more to lose if he is attacked. And the Gemara talks about how to collect funds necessary to build a wall, for example, around the city. Do you tax everybody a flat rate, like a shul imposing a surcharge on everybody for a common need? Is there a flat rate for everybody? Or do you base it on a person's income or how much he has to lose? Or is it in a third option, at least in the walled city scenario, is it based on proximity to the wall? If you're in the middle of the city, as opposed to somebody who lives near the edge of the city, chances are, if you're near the edge of the city, you're more prone to attack. So should your fee go up? And these are all discussions that the Gemara has. It comes up with different conclusions. There's also a discussion about a caravan that might be kidnapped in the desert. And you buy them off. But does everybody pay the same amount, or do people who have more money kick in more because they have more to lose? If same thing also applies to discussion if you are lost and you have to pay somebody to get you out of there, because basically everybody's life's on the line if you're lost in the desert. So these are all discussions in the halacha, which comes up with several different answers. Do you charge people by wealth or by the individual? And both of these models are based on the benefit to the individual. Somebody with more money would benefit more from being protected, but sometimes everybody benefits equally. So this discussion goes on uh, in the Gemara at great length, uh, and there are many, many variables to determine how that security fee is determined. In our shul, there's a flat fee that we pay. But there are other models that would say those people, for example, in Frankfurt am Main, in Germany, 100 years ago, dues were based on income. Not everybody paid the same amount of dues to the shul, and there's a Talmudic basis for that. Today we don't do that, but that was a halachic practice not so long ago. The Maharam Mirutenberg, 13th century, talks about volunteers guarding the city, but then later on they decided to hire professionals. And when you have volunteers guarding the city, then everybody takes a turn. It's not based on wealth. But if they hire security personnel, then those who stand to lose more should pay more for that privilege or for that protection. The Trumas Adeshen in the 15th century, that if it could be done by volunteers, then it's primarily the responsibility of the shul, of the community, to protect itself. If a person can't do it, he has to pay for a replacement. And if it's something that is felt cannot be done by volunteers, then again, you divide up the cost based on ability to pay or wealth. And the Ramah actually codifies this in Shulchan Aruch, that when you're providing security for a community, and we're not talking about individual shuls, we'll get to that later, but when you're talking about an entire community, again, we were talking about a period of time when the community was united. Today, of course, we don't have that situation. But in a united community, the Ramah codifies the halacha and Shulchan Aruch that it's based on income. If you have more to lose, you pay more for the security. Today, most shuls are a hybrid. Usually, not always, but usually people who have more wealth contribute more to the shul voluntarily, as opposed to those who simply pay dues and nothing else. And there's also a recommendation, according to the Ramah, that security for a community, again, we're talking about a community, not an individual shul yet. Security for a community should not come from shul's budgets. It should come from a different fund that is put together for that purpose. Now, one of the questions that determines how we proceed is whether or not a security issue is considered pikuach nefesh or not. Is it a life-threatening emergency? Is security in general, in most cases, is not an immediate need. It's not something, unless you've gotten a threatening note that the anti-Semitic mob is going to descend upon your shul this Shabbos. If there's no current threat or particular threat, it might be too remote to be considered pikuach nefesh. And generally, we don't follow statistical majorities when it comes to determining pikuach nefesh.
Wally,
Yes.
unfortunately, as we've learned with some of the episodes in Houston, Pittsburgh, etc., you don't know the threat in advance. So you always it has to be 24/7.
So again, there is room to say that if there is a likelihood, however remote, but if there is a likelihood that the shul is under potential targeting for some type of inappropriate attack, then of course it will be
Inappropriate attack.
and Chilul Shabbos is not on the table anymore. Again, this might be why it might be preferable, because we don't know what's going to happen, to have armed security guards who are not volunteers. Many shuls have volunteers with walkie-talkies, and they check everybody that comes in, and then look in your talis bag and so forth and so on, or your pocketbook if you carry one in the Eruv. And they check people I know in many of the larger shuls, they have guards posted at every entrance. Like, for example, this Shabbos, I'm going to be out in the 5 towns, and they have 3 different entrances to get into the shul. And there are security guards at every entrance. And if they don't recognize you, they'll ask to look at your talis bag. And on Sukkot, I have my lulav and esrog in a rifle case. They asked me to open it up, and I'm happy to do so. So that every shul has to make a determination for itself. The poskim argue how much of a statistical possibility is considered pikuach nefesh in a situation where you have volunteers. Rabbi Akiva Eger says, 1 in 1,000 is not considered pikuach nefesh. And other achronim say, if there's nobody, there's no immediate threat, it's not considered pikuach nefesh. But you 2 different opinions. Rabbi Akiva Eger is very makel, and others are much more machmir. The Chazon Ish has an interesting take on it. The Chazon Ish says, if the threat is such that everybody gets together to say Tehillim, if it's not kind of a threat, then that's considered pikuach nefesh. If it's not serious enough for you to start saying Tehillim, then it's not considered pikuach nefesh. Rav Moshe Feinstein says something very similar. But again, it depends on how nervous the people are. If people are very concerned, they're very, very nervous, you live in a bad neighborhood and so forth, again, if you're a more relaxed personality, you may not be concerned. So there are many, many variables that you have to ask a shaila about. Interesting, Rav Shlomo Zalman Auerbach poskins that if something happened during the week and that would make you very, very nervous, that will be considered pikuach nefesh. So you apply the same principle at Shabbos. If you're very, very nervous and you're very, very scared and you're very, very upset, then that is sufficient. Again, none of this applies if you have non-Jewish security guards employed, which would probably be the easiest way to go. Potential pikuach nefesh is also a fascinating halachic discussion. For example, there's a fascinating shaila that was asked. If you have an IDF vehicle during the week, an IDF vehicle, and the spare tire in the Jeep is flat. Now, the regular tires are fine. The spare tire is flat. Would you change that spare tire? And 9 times out of 10, the answer would be absolutely, because you never know when something might happen. So that already, it takes a long view. We never know. I mean, there are still situations when you drive along Moreland Avenue and somebody will yell out some anti-Semitic comment. It still happens, not as much as it used to when we first opened the shul. But now, once in a while, you'll get some redneck making a comment. So these are some of the issues. Again, many shuls have volunteers to check with and a walkie-talkie, a phone to call 911 if anything should happen. But again, we know, unfortunately, from history, recent events, that it doesn't take too much time for tragedy to occur. So by the time you call 911, by the time the police come, it might be too late. Which is why, again, the preferable method would be to employ armed security guards who themselves could handle any threatening situation. Because having volunteers with walkie-talkies, first of all kinds of shilos about whether you can use the walkie-talkies on Shabbos, so forth and so on. But another question comes up is, should you allow shul members to carry weapons on Shabbos? And I know there are a number of synagogues, not Orthodox to my knowledge, but there are a number of conservative synagogues in Bergen County where designated shul members carry a weapon to shul on Shabbos. Hopefully they're trained. Hopefully they know how to use their weapons, but that's a serious question. More often than not, volunteers with pistols are not necessarily trained, not only in the use of the weapon, but to use it under pressure. So that's a separate type of question. We don't have that question here, to my knowledge. But again, armed security guards would seem to be the way to go. Hatzola carrying walkie-talkies is a whole different question, and that's been resolved a long time ago. Another question concerning security is surveillance cameras. Most shuls have surveillance cameras. Is there a problem having your picture taken by a surveillance camera on Shabbos? The camera observes everybody that goes in and out of the shul, and it records it. In case, God forbid, there's an event and you want to have a picture of the person that's committing this particular act of violence. Well, certainly anybody who walks into shul, first 9 times out of 10, you aren't aware your picture's being taken. It's certainly eino miskaven, you're not doing it on purpose. And there's no, the benefit to you is basically inconsequential because you're not even aware that it's happening most of the time. And there's a very technical discussion about psik resha, the lo nichole. It's a very difficult sugya altogether about psik resha. Whether it's most of the time it's only the rabbanon. There are some who are machmir, some who are mekil. Basically, we say that it's the rabbanon and it's lo nichole. It's not something you really want or you're concerned about. And the surveillance cameras, in most cases, are not an issue. They have them at the kotel as well on Shabbos. And it's not your intention to be photographed. People have no interest in being photographed on Shabbos. And you're basically dealing with a technical psik ratio, lo nichole, lo ichpasle, and so forth and so on. So that's less of a problem. However, if you have screens, sometimes the system has screens that display footage in real time, that might be a problem. But again, it would probably be the rabbanon because taking a picture is compared to writing. But it's writing that is not permanent because unless if it's saved, is that considered ksiva that shall kayama or not? It's a very nice machlokas. You want to get involved there. Rabbi Willig said that if there's no real security need to leave the screen on, and it might be considered a shasat chak, an emergency situation, so there are heterim for it. But that's less of a problem today than the question of security guards and weapons. Weapons, and also talks Isur of carrying a weapon. It's a klisha malachto the Isur, and you get involved in some very technical Hilchos Shabbos. But the bottom line is that the real machlokas, which we have not really resolved in terms of our practice, is to, number one, there is a need to protect the shul. That it seems to be very clear. We've had too many negative events in the past, too many lives lost by crazy people who attack shuls. So there is a need. In all probability, a paid armed security guard is the best and safest way to go. It avoids all halakhic shilas completely. The only halakhic shilah is how you pay for it. Most shuls pay for it with a flat fee. It costs X amount of dollars to have these guards there, and therefore you calculate what it costs and you divide it among the membership. La halacha, that could be problematic because those who have more to lose should be paying more, because that was based on what used to be.
Wally,
Yes.
what about protecting only the Sefer Torahs on Shabbos,
Well,
not human life?
protecting the Sifrei Torah, it's an interesting question. And one of the things that I really don't know the answer to is we really have not had any security drills in our shul. We really should. What to happen? In many shuls, the Aron Kodesh is really a safe, a metal safe. that is disguised as an Aron Kodesh, and it's locked up. And we need a policy in place, and I would advocate to talk to the leadership of the shul on this. We need a policy in place that the minute there is some type of security breach or something or other, that the Aron Kodesh has to be sealed and locked. But our Aron Kodesh is not really a safe. It can be locked, but it's a wooden door. It can be broken open very easily. There are many shuls that I've been in where the Aron Kodesh is actually a very large, metal safe, and it can't be opened up once it's closed unless you know the combination. And it can't be. So we really need security drills in our shuls to protect the Sifrei Torah. We haven't, again, I don't recall, I don't daven upstairs in the main menu, but I don't recall if we, even downstairs in Ashkama, I don't know if we haven't had security drills to my knowledge. And
We
have all
did, Wally, we did.
in the shul.
I think we even had it on the Shabbos.
We did?
Many years ago already.
Yeah, many years ago.
Okay, but we have all this gadgetry that nobody knows how to operate.
Correct.
You got bills, you got bells, you got lights, you got locks, but nobody has been taught in the case of an emergency, in a lockdown, how do you operate this stuff? And how do you protect the Sifrei Torah? Our Aron Kodesh is not a safe. And perhaps at the next board meeting, Shabbat introduce a resolution that we create a fund to install a safe or some type of way to protect the Sifrei Torah, other than just locking a bunch of wooden doors.
Rabbi,
God forbid, 1,000 times something should have happened. There's no way to protect those Sifrei Torah and of course, all the silver that's in there.
Rabbi,
Yes.
you had said that probably the best way in terms of security is a paid security guard as opposed to shul volunteers.
Yes.
Two questions. One, I'm assuming that you mean a paid, not non-Jewish.
Yes. Yes. Non-Jewish. Yes.
Second question is in Eretz Yisrael, it's a constant, I think you could look at it as a constant pikuach nefesh situation. And so many citizens might be coming to shul with some kind of weapon,
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, Israel is in a constant state of pikuach nefesh, number one. Number two, in any given shul, there are always people carrying weapons. Now, on Shabbos, when you enter, the larger shuls have a guard posted at the door, and they'll ask when you come in, are you carrying a weapon?
Oh, wow.
They'll ask you but there are people in shul, whether they're reserve soldiers or they're just people who have a license to carry. It's an amazing thing that you have all these teenagers walking around with machine guns and rifles, and you have less of a problem in Israel, of course, than we have in America with people walking around with the AK-47s. It's a crazy situation where there are no gun laws preventing that, and they have, of course, fewer situations than we have in America about people shooting up places. But unfortunately, it's a serious issue. The issue of pikuach nefesh, how do you determine when it is or when it isn't? How do you get around some of the halachas of Shabbos with some of these things? And as I say, many shuls do have volunteers, but if God forbid there should be an episode where you have to call the police, the walkie-talkies are very good, and the phone systems to call the police, but by the time the police get there, the damage could be done, given the fact that people walk around with the automatic rifle. One pull of the trigger can kill 20 people right on the spot. The automatic weapon, so it goes automatically. So the safest way would be, as I said, to have security guards that are armed, who are not Jewish. The only question is, how do you determine to pay for that? And shuls do a flat fee. There's a fee tacked onto your membership, but according to the Shulchan Aruch, it should probably be based on the relative wealth of members. Now, again, that may represent a time when a different time in Jewish history. Today, I don't think that would be able to pass very well.
Wally,
Yes.
a person who's a garbage collector, if he gets hurt where he can't work anymore, he's going to lose a lot more than a factory owner who's very wealthy.
Okay, you could make all kinds of arguments as to which is the fairest system. But if somebody destroys my factory, I have a lot more to lose than a person who is a salaried worker for somebody else. And therefore, my potential loss is greater. Or if I own real estate and my real estate could get burnt down, I lose a lot more than the next person. So I should pay more to protect that investment, so to speak. But again, this was a model in the late Middle Ages. It has not been changed. Shulchan Aruch is the Shulchan Aruch, but practical situations have changed, and a flat fee is the way most people go. And as I said, some shuls have volunteers, some shuls have paid. It is my personal opinion that a paid armed security guard is the best investment that a shul can make in terms of protecting their security. The only questions that remain is how to best protect the Sifrei Torah in the Aron. And unless your Aron is a cast iron vault, those Sifrei Torah and the silver in it remain vulnerable. Because even when you're not in shul, somebody can break into the shul at night and get into this, even though the alarm might go off. You have a number of minutes until the Fair Law police respond if you try to break into the Aron Kodesh. That's enough time to break in and steal Sifrei Torah or steal silver. If it's a safe, you can't get in that easily.
Okay, Wally,
Have safes, yes,
Wally,
yes.
I have two questions. If you have a safe and there's a combination lock, is it permissible to open that lock on Shabbos?
Yes. Because you're not doing anything.
Yes.
There's nothing, as long as it's not electrical, mechanical, and all you're doing is opening up tumblers.
Oh,
It's like a regular combination lock.
So-
You're not doing anything. It's the same combination lock you have on your locker downstairs.
now those are useless, Wally. Those locks, if you're talking about a guy breaking in at night and you have a combination, a master combination lock, that's useless. It can come with a clip of bingo, it's gone. So that's not a good lock. You need one like in a bank's vault or a big safety one in some businesses, a jeweler's place, that kind of a lock.
Okay.
Now, I guess there's still some that are hand-driven. You can put in the combination itself. I would say that most are probably electronic. But let's say we could find a big, strong safe like that where you can still put in a combination.
Yes.
Would that be permissible?
If it's not electrical, yes.
Okay, so if I'm the Rabbi, I can open up that combination. There's no restriction on putting in numbers and getting something to click. Isn't that some sort of an avoda or something like that?
Not really. I mean, I'm not really. I've been in many shuls where the Gabbai does exactly that.
I know that. I said that, so because
Not a
but
problem.
it may be
As long as it's
it may
not,
be-
as long as it isn't an electronic lock, it should not be a problem.
okay. And I've also seen a lot of places where there are hired non-Jewish security guards, and there are Jewish volunteers from the shul who stand there with him.
Right.
Yes, yes.
Okay, we had that down in Florida. I see that in Young Israel, Latinx,
Because
they have some volunteers there.
the purpose
So-
of that is because the members of the shul, the security guard of the shul, the Jewish ones, can tell can recognize who's a member, who's not a member.
Exactly.
Yeah, so
Exactly.
a combination of the two is certainly in order, not a problem. And many shuls, again,
And
many shuls do
they
that.
don't even have to carry walkie-talkies, the Jewish ones.
What's that?
They don't have to necessarily carry a walkie-talkie on
No,
Shabbos. They
no.
could just be there to,
Yes, absolutely.
yeah.
There are many
So
different, there are many different models that are out there. Correct. Correct.
Okay.
I know that in Livingston, for example, where my daughter is, so they have shul volunteers, but they also have a policeman who's the crossing guard. So they have a cop there with a weapon all the time anyway. He's not there on security duty. He's there because they have to go across the main street, so he stops traffic. But there's somebody there at least. Any other questions? There are a lot of interesting halachos about security procedures in communities. Again, in the Middle Ages, when these halachos were formulated, and in the Gemara as well, they didn't have issues of security guards for individual shuls. They had security guards for the entire city. And most of the cities had a wall around it or some type of a gate to keep people out at night. So it was only during the daytime when it was a concern. And then they would have different people performing different tasks. But the major questions are how you pay for it. I indicated the different models. And the preference for non-Jewish armed security guards, simply from a logical and security perspective, makes the most sense. But if the shul can't afford it, then certainly having volunteers would be a step in the right direction. But all of these things are discussed, and the poskim, the contemporary poskim, deal with, under what situation is it considered pikuach nefesh? As we pointed out before, in Israel, Israel lives in a state of pikuach nefesh. That's very clear, because Israel only has to lose once and it's all over. So Israel is in a constant state of pikuach nefesh. Today, unfortunately, the climate, the anti-Semitic climate in the United States, you might be able to make an argument in a similar direction, although it would be very hard to state that Jews in America today live in a constant state of pikuach nefesh. I don't think it's constant, but I think there are threats, and there are credible
It's
threats.
increasing. It's increasing,
There are
unfortunately.
credible threats, and I think it would be wise for every shul to take proper security measures, and every shul has to determine what's right for them. Hopefully, we will come to a period of time when this won't be necessary. But in the meantime, we have to do it in a responsible way and with halakha guidelines. A number of years ago, when this issue first came up, the decision was made, not to allow volunteers to use walkie-talkies, and that's a halakhic decision. That can sometimes change. So there are many different points of view that we could follow, and there halachos you have to ask your posek as to what is the appropriate procedure for your individual community. Hopefully, this will not be a problem going forward.
Amen.
Okay.
Can you get in, Brett?
Any
I'm
other
a little
questions?
closer first. Go in and I'll back up.
Okay. Have a wonderful and safe Shabbos.
I have a favor to ask everybody, please, for Sunday. Being on time is very important. If you signed up for the 8 o'clock minyan, please be there on time. The minyan needs to start on time. Also, the breakfast is starting at 8:30, and the actual program is scheduled for 8:50. Please, I'm asking for a favor. Please be on time on Sunday and have a good Shabbos.
Thank
Good
you.
Shabbos.
Let's get correct.